Okay, so let's go ahead and get this started. So tonight we are talking about spotting fake news online. And part of our presentation is also brought to us tonight by EBSCO host. So that's, I think, is a ferret friend here um, who's part of the presentation. He is one of the little mascots for EBSCO host. So you'll see that pop in and out of our presentation tonight. So tonight, our learning goals are understanding why it's important to question the truthfulness of articles and images that you find on the internet, and also to define confirmation bias and recognize how it impacts your decision making every day, and develop strategies for identifying fake news and images. So something such as this is going to be important in the coming weeks as we are prepping ourselves to vote if we haven't already done early voting or absentee voting. So these strategies are helpful in those kinds of decisions as well. So what are the different ways that we experience news? Those different ways would be social media, TV, newspapers, magazines, radio, and podcasts. Can even be word of mouth from just having people around and telling you about everything. So here is a really great chart. This was just updated this year. Every year there is different charts that come out from different organizations. This one is from Ad Fontes Media, and they have just kind of listed out on a chart here different news sources. So it's not going to include everything, partially because they haven't looked at it, and also it can't fit on the screen. So in the middle, you have neutral at the top. And then if you look on the side, you have scores of reliability. So in the middle is kind of like the most reliable, and then, middle is kind of mediocre. The higher you go is more reliable. Oops, I'm sorry. And down is less reliable. They also have confirmation bias on here, both left and right on the bottom. And then they also have something new that they didn't have previous years, are these colored squares where they kind of have a key here on the side for, from their research, they find the most reliable. So they're trying to steer you in most reliable and neutral for the top here in green. And then down below would be most unreliable. So that's just a really nice chart that helps you see maybe where some of the news sources that you might use might sit. And keep in mind that it's always good to mix it up and try not to stay in your bubble. Try to get multiple sources. We can come back to this too when we're looking at some stuff. But in terms of living in your bubble, so confirmation bias is our natural tendency to seek out or favor information that confirms what you might already believe to be true, while at the same time ignoring the evidence that contradicts your beliefs. So this is something that everybody is guilty of doing, no matter how much you try. The most thoughtful person who is trying to be as neutral as possible is always going to have a little bit of confirmation bias. It's just kind of a human nature thing. So it's important to know that and to remember that as you are critiquing information that you are taking in every day. So in finding our fake news, there are certain steps that you can go through to kind of create the skills that you need. So before you use any piece of information or share it to anybody, it's really important to go through these checklists to make sure that everything is good to use. So the first one is read beyond the headline. So that would be looking past certain language that's used. Sometimes certain language might be used to get your attention more than it is the truth. And I'll show you that in a second. Number two is consider the source. So I think this would be going back to the chart that we had 2 slides previous. So considering your source, where does it lie on the map of neutrality and reliability? And making sure that the article has an author or a photographer if it's an image. If things don't have an author labeled, that is not going to be a trustworthy piece of information. Also, number 4, check the date. Sometimes things circulate out there, especially on social media, that is actually an old thing that happened, and people are not clicking on the original source to find the date. I know this has happened to me numerous times when I see things, and when I click on it, I eventually find, oh, that actually happened like a year ago or 2 years ago, and it's not any current information that I wouldn't have already known before. So make sure to check those dates. And then also check links. Sometimes things get taken off the internet when it comes to articles and pieces of information online. So sometimes the links no longer work. And if that's the case, then you need to try and find a different way to find the source to cite it. Otherwise, it is not usable in your believing it or citing it if you're writing it into something. Number 6 is checking the comments. If this is like a news story of any kind, then you definitely would want to check there. If there's just a lot of comments, it doesn't matter what kind, but if it's something that has a comment section, there might be a little bit of confirmation bias thrown into that source. A lot of neutral news sources don't have a comment section at the end of their articles. So that's something to just take note of. I guess it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad source, but it's questionable. So you want to definitely go through this checklist when you see a comment section. Number 7 is evaluating it, looking at the supporting quotes. If they have named other people in the source or in the story, then find those sources as well. Figure out who those people are, what are their credentials, do they have an authority to be able to be saying what they are, are they an expert at that certain topic? So evaluating it thoroughly, not just taking it at face value. Number 8 is asking, is this a joke? Unfortunately, there are a lot of satire newspapers out there on the internet, and a lot of people don't realize that. It's something, I don't know exactly the current ones when they were started, but it's always kind of been around. It's the same thing with political commentary and comics. There's different pictures that have been drawn for years and years on things that's satire. So there's also been the satire newspapers as well. Number 9 is ask whether or not your confirmation bias is affecting you in this. Do my own beliefs affect my judgment of what I'm reading right now? If it is, then it's definitely time to seek out sources that would contradict your confirmation bias, just to get the other side of the story. And another thing that you can do, number 10, part of your checklist of skills, is conduct a reverse image search. We're gonna show you that in a second here, but sometimes if you find an image somewhere and you can drag it into your search box and search just the image and see if it comes up as only being a part of the article that you were reading, or if it's been reused places and where it originally comes from. This is a really great handout that I just put into this slide. This is included in the handout that is in our chat. Again, I can share that at the end again if people don't see it in the chat. But it is called the Legit-O-Meter. It's from Common Sense Education, which is a really great tool for education and not just for children. I think this is very usable for adults as well. So they have, the yellow is in the middle, green is legit, red is fake. So things you want to pay attention to: does it end with .org, .gov, or .edu? These sites are usually more credible than uncredible. And unusual URL endings such as .com, .co, or .net, a lot of those can be questionable. So that's when you want to start going through your lists of, is this okay? Same thing with images and authors that we talked about in our checklist. You know, make sure they're credited to somebody. Look up who that person is if you haven't heard of them. If something says sponsored content, this is here in the middle, that means that it's actually specifically being used for advertising. So that I would be wary of. Anytime something says sponsored content or ad sponsored or something like that. Also, if something has a lot of pop-ups all over the page, lots of banner ads, that's also something that you might want to stop and figure out where your information is coming from. Headlines, it's good if they are direct and to the point. If there are typos and bad grammar, that would be a red flag for me. I would start questioning things. And headlines that use really big words such as epic, amazing, unbelievable, or incredible, sometimes that would point to not being a real news story. So again, that's when you would get out your checklist. So one thing here that you might see is the legit and fake things have evoke a strong emotional reaction. So they're saying here that real news stories usually make you have a gut reaction, and the fake news stories would mess with your immediate emotions to get you to click on stuff. So it'd be more, I guess, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a reaction without thinking, instead of just kind of taking it in and just feeling like, ugh, in your gut kind of thing, kind of reaction emotionally. Also, you always want to, when you're researching a source, to look for the about section. So a credible source is always going to have that, where they're going to talk about the authors and, you know, maybe the history of that organization, how they became to be. If there is no about section on that website, that is a red flag, and I would start doing some research on that. And I have another great thing from Common Sense Education here that talks about, okay, so here's somebody looking on their iPad or tablet on a website. Can you spot the things that would tell you that it's not real? So this is obviously kind of an over dramatization of what you might see, but it's definitely something to think about. So at the top, you have a different ending in the web address. So I think it's .com.co. So like we said in the previous slide, make sure you're looking at those web addresses. Is there an About Us section? If it's asking you to sign up for something to get more content, that would also be a red flag. So that's that sign up for more exclusive content there on the right side. Using lots and lots of images with certain words might be clickbait. Or if it says, sponsored. So that's kind of an example where it says sponsored content on the top of that image where it says enhance. Exclamation points, using those a lot is definitely a sign that it's a questionable resource. The lack of any kind of expert quotes, that's also something, that you need to watch out for. If at all, there's no dates anywhere on anything, or use of outdated ones, they might show that. And like we said, grammatical error. So it says top stories with an exclamation point and an S. So that's not how you would say stories or spell it. It's S-T-O-R-I-E-S. So seeing that grammatical error, that's just an example there. And then images that are altered or manipulated or downright kind of weird. So like this is some picture of a supposed alien, things like that. And then also using all capitals. Most news sources that are considered credible don't use all capital letters for even their titles. So that is another red flag. And again, this also is in the handout. So if you feel like you want an example later, like I said, this is a little bit over the top, but it's still stuff that is out there. So here's an example when we're talking about politics where confirmation bias might come in with an article using a political photo, even if the topic isn't necessarily political. So looking at these two, which article do you think would be shared on social media if you believed left-handed people are more creative than right-handed people? So here we have two different pictures. One is of former President Obama doing something, signing something, and it says, "Right is wrong, the surprising life benefits of being left-handed." So they're trying to get a political spin on it, when actually the point you're trying to get across is something about somebody being physically left-handed and that linking to their intelligence. And so the other photo here is just of some art of hands, and it's dispelling the myth of the left-handed genius. So it should be obvious that the photo that has the confirmation bias is the one that has Obama in it. because it has nothing to do with the actual topic at hand. So that is not one that you would want to share. So if you come across that in social media, that would not be one that I would click share to all of my friends. So it's important to be looking at the title with the photo. What is the title really trying to say? And does that match the photo? Because if it doesn't match the photo, that in itself is a red flag. Same thing here. So this is actually a photo that did circulate while former President Bush was in office. And he visited an elementary school to read some books to them. I'm not sure, this must have been some holiday that he was reading to them for. And somebody took this picture, photoshopped it, took the book and flipped it upside down and then put it back on the photo. So you had the real picture kind of circulating, and then you also had the fake picture where the book was upside down. Obviously, they were trying to discredit the former president because he was reading a book upside down to children. So obviously, because there's, multiple photos, news stories, and witnesses that were there that the book was not upside down, that this was something that another place just decided to Photoshop and post for their own confirmation bias. So again, when you see something that seems kind of out of place, like why would the president's aides let him sit in front of children with a book upside down? It's kind of obvious that they wouldn't let that happen. They are, always with the president, whoever the president is. So those kinds of mistakes, I think, would be corrected. And I think that in itself is just kind of a wait. What is this photo? I don't know what's going on. Let me check this kind of question that you should always bring to the table. This is another silly, but another actual example of evaluating the credibility of images. So this photo was supposed to be in Christchurch, New Zealand, of flooding that happened there. And someone photoshopped an image of an orca swimming in the floodwater streets. This did not happen, but you can see where it looks really real. But it's also really out of place because you're like, why would that happen? That wouldn't happen, like that water, while it may be deep, I don't think is going to be deep enough for an orca to swim there. And that would just be a red flag. Then you start researching other websites. And when I say research, I mean you can do Google searches. That's probably the best one where you can just start looking to see what mentions, orca swimming in Christchurch, New Zealand, would be like an example of something that you would type out in a Google search. So it's a silly example, but it actually happened. There's silly stuff out there. So be aware of the images. People can Photoshop very easily. You don't have to be an expert at Photoshopping to be able to make something look fairly real. This is another one. This circulated on social media like wildfire, and I think it still does sometimes. So it was during news stories during Hurricane Sandy. And so this was supposedly a picture of some soldiers standing during Hurricane Sandy in front of the tomb of the unknown soldier. And that, they're saying, no matter what, these soldiers are here to stand there even in a hurricane. But in reality, the photo was actually taken during a different rainstorm, just a regular rainstorm, not a hurricane, and definitely not Hurricane Sandy, which was a very devastating hurricane for the East Coast. So something like this is another example, and actually not as silly as the previous one, but something that happens. We have people that do stand there every day. So whether or not the photo is true for the event is a different question. And I'm not sure exactly in what context, what other words were with this image on the social media, but it was mixed. So that did happen, that picture did happen, but not with the event that it said that it did. So the way that you would do that is you would drag a copy of the image into your search box in Google search, and then it'll do a reverse and just search the image instead of words for you. This also happens in terms of information for things such as like papers. So if you're doing a research paper on the effects of nuclear radiation, if you're not in a credible spot, you could stumble upon this picture, which originally was posted on a photo sharing site, Emerger, and it's of these little daisies that grew with some abnormalities and made the flower look weird. And somebody decided to post it out there and say, this is what happens when flowers are around nuclear radiation. They grow weird like this. And it wasn't true. So, the way that you would find this out is, again, doing a reverse image search. So you would copy the image, drag it over to your Google search box, and then hit search, and it should come up showing you the news stories about how this is not real. This was an abnormality somewhere, but who knows why it's not because of nuclear radiation. And I think it came out, I can't remember exactly when, but I think it might have been after the Fukushima because I think, at the top it says Fukushima nuclear flowers. So that's when we had a big earthquake in Japan, and it let off some radiation from the power plant. People try to get you to believe anything. That's the thing that you need to remember. Clickbait is also a huge thing. This happens a lot in those banners on websites, and they usually have catchy headlines or images to get you to click. Sometimes it has to do with like beauty tips or celebrities or ways to get rich quick, or how to slim down in 2 weeks, how to lose 10 pounds in a day, kind of thing, where it's like that normally doesn't happen. That's not normally a thing you read about. So it's probably going to be clickbait. So just be aware of catchy headlines and just completely unbelievable photos. So let's play a game. There are, how many of you are here today? 5 of you? Yeah. So you can unmute yourself if you want to play, but which ones do you think are actual news stories and which ones are clickbait? Does anyone want to take a stab at it?
Is the third one a real story?
Correct. That is actually the only one that is a real news story. So you are right. So all the other ones are clickbait. Like I said, that has stuff to do with beauty, health tips, health and completely weird things like world's oldest woman kind of information. Usually those kinds of articles are going to be found in like the world record books, but not really anywhere else. All right. So there are a bunch of different resources that you can use. I'm going to finish this PowerPoint here, and then we're going to look at some on my screen. But the best fact-checking websites, factcheck.org is a good one. Snopes.com is also another good one. And in terms of political information, since we're coming up on the election here, politifact.com is also a really good one. There's also a really great website where you can go through and do more little testing your skills examples, and it's going to be a little better than some of the examples I gave you, because a lot of those are kind of broad, but I've done a few of them because they have different kinds that you can choose, and some of them can really really get you to second guess, and I'm not proud to say that the ones that I've done, some of them I didn't do so good at, because they're really good at tricking you. It's not always, something you think about. And then we also have really good election resources out there. Some of, I think, the ones that I use the most and that we talk about at the library is myvote.wisconsin.gov for any questions about absentee voting, early voting, registering to vote, things like that. I think today is the last day to get an absentee ballot. Correct me if I'm wrong. And there's also our City of Middleton page for elections. So that's the address there. And then ballotpedia.org is a really great resource that you can use to search any politician or candidates in the entirety of the United States to get information about them. So just, what their platform is, things they've said, things that have been proven false that they've said, and all that other stuff. It's a really great place to just get a lot of information for you to be able to make the best choice for yourself. And it's very neutral in terms of bias. So that's a great one. And just so, because this is about having credible information here, I do have my sources listed for all of the images that we use today here. So if you do have questions about that, there are the sources, and you can access that later. Like I said, this is being recorded, so you can look at that later if you'd like. I'm going to now go to my screen. Bring up. I'm going to stop share for a second. I'm going to share again. Okay, so I have PolitiFact up on here. So there are places where you can do public record searches for people in certain states. They have some of the most latest fact checks that they've been doing. So there's different, when people put tweets out when there might be debates, or if there's a big news story for the day, there might be some stuff listed on there too.
Hey, Mommy. Oh, mine's broken downstairs.
I apologize, my son just broke into our class here.
Hey, Mommy.
Hi, honey. Mommy's doing a class.
Mommy, doing that.
Yep, thank you for visiting. All right. So this is a really great source, and they have a lot of things listed here. You can go within states. You can top people that you might want to be looking for. They also have the same thing with media. So if there is authors of a news story out there, whether it's a recording of somebody on TV or an author for a written article, you can also search people this way for authors in that sense as well. So there's also Snopes. So this one is kind of, you can submit a topic. If they don't have something, you can look at what's new. On their homepage, they're going to have some of the top ones. So here's their latest articles. There's a lot on there. And then also factcheck.org. With my, there we go. So factcheck.org is also kind of the same thing. They have kind of top ones. You can do a search if you have something specific that you're looking for. Another great, this is on the handout. Another great resource is this list that's on Wikipedia. So some of you might cringe and say, what, Wikipedia? I didn't think that that was a credible source. And actually, over the years, Wikipedia has started becoming a pretty good place to find information. It is constantly being checked. It is, a crowdsourced resource, so you always have to be a little like, depending on what you're searching for, what if this isn't real? But the great thing is that they do have the list of sources at the end of each page. So you can try to find out where the original source came from. And this is a website that American Library Association has voted every year as some of the top places for librarians to answer reference questions. So this is a really good little list here they have for fake news websites. So they do have a nice definition here of what makes a fake news site. And then also they have lists, and this is an international list here. And they have different notes that might be on why they might say that it's a fake news source. And if I remember correctly, yeah, they have, most of the American ones are going to be in the international list. For some reason, they have a Philippine list that's separate. Then they also have some different articles here that are related to a fake news source. So you can specifically go to ones that's just fake news websites in the US, or if you want to go by country, because fake news has been around for a long, long time. In the past, it was called yellow journalism. So there's going to be a lot out there on it. Some other things that I have on the handout. Duke Reporters Lab is out of their Center for Journalism, and they have maps where you can look at other fact check organizations. And they have, this map is always updated. So let's see. You have to locate fact-checking sites around the world. So if you click on the US, there's PolitiFact, and there's some other ones on here. So ones that I didn't list, but there are other ones that you can find here. And sometimes it's good to find one in specific places if you're looking for a local area. But it does show like all around the world. So like here's some in South America. So it's a really great source. This is Factitious. This is the website that I told you about that gives you examples to go through. So you're like taking a quiz on whether or not you can figure out it's real or fake. So again, this can be tricky. They're really good at tricking you. And I think this resource here kind of shows you more real examples than what I could show you, just because it's tailored to it. So I definitely recommend that you go and look at this and try one of them. There are different ones. So this one, I'm not sure. I think this is just the general one. Let's look. So, click on. It tells you the instructions here. So swipe right if you think the article is real. Swipe left if you think it's fake. Or you can use the cross and the check mark. So they have you read an article. If you want to, you can look at the source and then you decide whether or not it's fake. So again, it's pretty good at tricking you. Trying to find, there's different topics that you can get. Oh, here we go. So this is just the regular Factitious that the link that I have on your handout goes to, but they also have a pandemic edition, which I do think is important to look at as well. You know, finding out what's real and what not real about our current pandemic situation. It's something that you can look at. I am going to go ahead and just one more time put in the handout for anybody who didn't see it before. I want to make sure. Okay. So I put the handout in the chat one more time. So hopefully you can download that to your computer. And again, if you can't, I am going to have it posted on our website tomorrow, as well as a recording of this. If you feel like you like to go back and rewatch something, or if you have some friends or family that you want to watch this, or also that said they wanted to watch it but they missed it, that's going to be posted on our website. So if you have any questions, this would be the time now. You can ask them. Again, I'm just a, not just a, but I'm a library assistant at the library. So as much as I like to be an expert on information literacy, I may not know the question to or the answer to everything. Might have to look something up for you to get a true answer. But definitely go ahead, unmute yourself if you have any questions. Otherwise, that is our class for tonight. And again, I'll have that handout posted and this recording posted tomorrow. And definitely be wary out there when you are looking at news stories. Go through your checklists.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, Joan, sometimes it can be a little scary. Just use your resources and you'll get through it though. All right, well, I'm not seeing any
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Not seeing any questions, so I'm gonna go ahead and we'll end this meeting here, and I hope you all have a great evening.